Hi everyone, and welcome to the Softball Canada Speaker Series presented by Rawlings Canada. Today's webinar will be about mental performance with our special guests, Larissa Franklin from the Women's National Team Program and Derek Mason from the Men's National Team. Although the softball season is currently suspended in many areas of the country due to the COVID-19 situation, we are happy to have the opportunity to engage with everyone listening at home, and we hope you will enjoy listening to our great speakers. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à la série de webinaires de Softball Canada présentée par Rawlings Canada. Le webinaire d'aujourd'hui est sur la psychologie sportive avec nos invités spéciaux Larissa Franklin du programme de l'équipe nationale féminine et Derek Mason de l'équipe nationale masculine. Quoique la saison de softball est présentement suspendue dans plusieurs régions du pays en raison de la situation COVID-19, on est heureux d'avoir la chance de nous engager avec vous et on espère que vous aimerez écouter à nos excellents invités. La majorité de ce webinaire aura lieu en anglais, mais vous pouvez quand même poser vos questions en français. Veuillez s'il vous plaît poser vos questions dans la boîte des questions sur votre écran durant les présentations. On posera vos questions aux invités à la fin. The majority of this webinar will take place in English, but we will also be able to answer questions in French. Please make sure you type your questions in the questions box throughout the webinar. We will be working your questions in at the end of the presentation. Before we get started, we want to thank everyone for joining us and for following the social distancing measures as directed by the Government of Canada and your local health authorities. Softball Canada has been monitoring the situation closely and is posting regular updates on its website. The softball season is starting up in some areas of the country. We strongly encourage that you follow your local provincial and territorial association return to play guidelines while respecting all government public health regulations. Avant de commencer, on veut vous remercier d'être avec nous et de suivre les mesures de distanciation sociale telles qu'identifiées par le gouvernement du Canada et vos autorités locales de soins de la santé. Softball Canada surveille la situation de près et publie des mises à jour régulières sur son site web. La saison de softball commence dans certaines régions du pays. On vous encourage de suivre les lignes directrices de retour au jeu de votre association provinciale et territoriale, tout en respectant les directives de vos départements gouvernementaux de santé publique. This webinar series is presented by our proud partners at Rawlings Canada. Please join Rawlings Canada, Softball Canada, and all of our provincial and territorial partners as we celebrate National Play Catch Week until June 27th. Make sure you use the Play Catch hashtag and tag Softball Canada to show your support for this great initiative. Cette série de webinaires est présentée par nos fiers partenaires à Rawlings Canada. Veuillez joindre Rawlings Canada, Softball Canada et nos partenaires des associations provinciales et territoriales de softball alors qu'on célèbre la semaine nationale Play Catch jusqu'au 27 juin. Assurez-vous d'utiliser le hashtag Play Catch et de taguer Softball Canada pour montrer votre soutien pour cette excellente initiative. We also want to recognize our great partners at Home Run Sports who go above and beyond to support the game of softball. Home Run Sports is the exclusive umpire apparel supplier and online store of Softball Canada. To purchase your Softball Canada branded apparel, click on the Fan Zone link on the homepage of the Softball Canada website to access the Home Run Sports store. On veut aussi reconnaître nos excellents partenaires à Home Run Sports qui vont au-delà des attentes pour soutenir le sport du softball. Home Run Sports est le fournisseur exclusif de vêtements d'arbitre et le magasin en ligne de Softball Canada. Pour acheter vos vêtements de Softball Canada, cliquez sur le lien du magasin sur la page d'accueil du site web de Softball Canada pour accéder au magasin de Home Run Sports. Allow me to introduce Angela Ballantyne, Manager of Long-Term Player Development Programs at Softball Canada, who will be your host for today's webinar. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Jill. Good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. This topic is something that I think anyone can really relate to, not just in softball, but in many different aspects of life. And I'm really looking forward to hearing our presenters tonight and them telling their stories. Psychological skills, so things like mental imagery, focus, attention control, anxiety, and so many others are outlined in Softball Canada's athlete development matrix for each stage development. And it just so happens that right here on the front, is one of our speakers tonight. And this is an area of long-term player development and sport in general that's getting a lot more attention recently, and that's for a very good reason. So tonight's edition of the webinar series, we're going to speak to Larissa and Derek and have them discuss their own personal experiences and find out some of the tips and tricks and cues that they've been able to use in dealing with a lot of different situations as athletes, and hopefully pass those on for any athletes listening, for coaches and parents as well. And just to reiterate what Jill said, we really do welcome your questions, so please feel free to ask them at any time, and we will try to get to as many as we can. And yeah, just so enter them in the box, and we look forward to getting to your questions. So our first speaker this evening is Larissa Franklin. I'm going to go through a little bit of a bio here. Larissa was born in Maple Ridge, BC, and started playing with Ridge Meadows Softball Association and then the White Rock Renegades. She played 3 seasons at Indiana University, Purdue University, Fort Wayne, before transferring to Western Kentucky University. She had the opportunity to play in the NPF with the Canadian Wild in 2019. And she's been a part of the national team program since 2011, where she competed as a part of Team Canada at the WBSE Junior Women's World Championship in South Africa. She then played with the women's national team in 2013 at the World Cup of Softball and the WBSE America's Pan American Championship. And since then, she's been a mainstay in the outfield for Canada, competing in multiple international events. She was a part of the gold medal winning squad in 2015 at the Pan American Games in Toronto and is currently training with the athlete pool for the 2021 Olympics. So welcome, Larissa. Thanks so much for being with us tonight and sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's come on to listen today, and to Softball Canada, who continues to put on these awesome webinars. And it's funny listening to you give my bio and where I've come from and how long I've been on this team now. You know, I obviously lived it, but it's really crazy to me that, you know, I'm here today talking to everyone that's on the call. And not only that, I never would have thought I'd be talking about mental performance when I was younger. And I'll hit on that a little bit. So
yeah, why don't you walk us through your story and why we've invited you to speak today?
Yeah, so my story revolves around the topic of burnout. Just to ruin the punchline there, I'm going to get into talking a little bit about burnout and some of the mental skills that I was not working on as much as I should have been. And the cool thing about mental performance, like Angela hit on before, is it is applicable to life. So we can work on our catching skills, our pitching skills, hitting, defense, and those things don't directly translate to life. But what I love about mental performance is you're always working on how you talk to yourself, goal setting, overcoming adversity. And that's why this topic's really exciting for me. So as a young player, I didn't work on this very much. But as a veteran on the national team now, I definitely promote it to younger girls, and not sitting down and working specifically on those mental skills, but I was a competitive figure skater, and I think back to that, and that's where I had my focus. I had goals, I had things that I was working on, and I had my journal that I would constantly write that in. So there was a little bit of that mental work without me realizing it. Just to get into my story, it's very recent, which is why I enjoy talking about it. But in 2018, we were at the World Championships in Japan, and we ended up finishing 3rd. And I came out of that tournament feeling very good. I was happy with my performance. And the main reason for that was because that was the first year that I saw my hitting start to develop, and I saw success with it, because up until that point, I was mainly seen as a slapper. And so I added that hitting into my repertoire and saw the success. So I left that tournament saying, now what? I had success. I can now slap. I can now hit. What's next? And so I went into the fall, and I remember having a conversation with our coach, and he was explaining all of the things we were going to have to do in the coming season. And it was going to be long. It was going to be hard. and he wanted to make sure that people weren't getting burnt out. In my mind, I was like, I'm not going to get burnt out. Like, I enjoy softball. I've never not enjoyed softball. I enjoy coming and training and working on those little things. So that, that's not going to be me. And so I continued to train. I showed up to practice, and I would finish practice and think to myself, I don't feel like I did enough. And I had this perfectionist mindset, this belief that I had to be flawless. Like I said, I had a good tournament in 2018, and I thought that now meant that I had to be at this standard all the time.
Right.
And so I'd say that I wasn't doing enough. And I had to have this perfect attitude. I would think I should have worked on my mind. I had to have this perfect plan. I would think I should have come with a practice plan. Perfect execution. I would think I should be hitting more line drives. And all of these things I reiterated over and over and over again for 9 months, from September of 2018 until we got to our season at the end of May. And then on top of that, because of this perfectionist mindset, I also had negative self-talk, because since I wasn't doing enough, I now thought I'm getting slower. Today's a good day of hitting, but most days aren't. Maybe one good tournament was a fluke. And I'd be thinking these thoughts over and over again because, like I said, nothing was enough. To throw in the physical aspect, I was working part-time for Kidsport BC, and the office was located downtown. So I was still living in Maple Ridge, and it was an hour and a half commute by train and car to get to downtown. And from there, what my day would look like is I'd wake up at 6 a.m., I'd get downtown, I'd work until about 2:30, and I'd make my way over to the Richmond Oval, which was about a half an hour commute, and I would train from 2:30 to 7:30 and then get home at 8:30. And in my mind, growing up, I did multiple sports. I'd go to school, I'd go to figure skating, I'd go to softball, I'd get home at 8 o'clock, I'd wake up at 6:30 and go to figure skating. So I thought I could handle it. But it wasn't just that, it was everything else on top of that. And then I was trying to please people at the same time. So showing up to, I'm working part-time for Kidsport, I'm training, that's all the hours I have in my day. But I also have this need and this want that I want to give back to the game. I have a unique opportunity to share my knowledge, to share my energy with all of these young athletes, and I want to be able to give back to them. But as many of you probably know, at some point you have to start saying no. And that came in April, so I'll get to that pretty soon, but that came probably too late, where I wasn't prioritizing what I needed to be doing. So April 2019, I guess that's 7 months-ish past, and we went to fitness testing. So I showed up to fitness testing at the Richmond Oval, and I remember spinning on the bike, and I was sitting there looking around the room at all my teammates, the coaches are there, everyone's excited, a little bit nervous, and I'm thinking about how I'm feeling, and I was like, I'm not really nervous, I'm also not excited. I didn't have that killer instinct to be the best. Normally I show up to fitness testing and I'm like a little bit nervous because I want to be the best. I want to be better than I was last time. I want to be better than everybody that's there. And instead that was replaced with fear, that I had everything to lose and nothing to gain. And I came out of that fitness testing not performing very well. And I sat down with my coaches after the fitness testing, and they basically said, you are doing too much. You need to start saying no. If you don't take care of this now, come season, it's going to be a lot harder. And so we had this conversation, and I totally agreed. I was like, okay, I started saying no. But this was April, and we were starting at the end. So I had a month and a half that I could, maybe start to turn things around. Little did I know at this time, it wasn't just those physical things. It was the things I was telling myself every single day, the negative self-talk, the perfectionist mindset. Those were the things, coupled with the high workload that I wasn't managing, that would lead to the burnout. So we started up season, and looking back, I'm not even sure if I was performing well or not at the start of season, because to me, I wasn't performing well. And regardless if I was performing, you know, pretty average for that time of year, I had the mindset that nothing I was going to do was enough. And that was because for 9 months, I told myself I wasn't doing enough. So it didn't even matter come that time how well I was doing. I was going to think that I had to be doing more. And so we started our season, and we were about 2 months in. And that's where we were in Minnesota, and I would go up to the bat, and I really started to notice that I'd go up to bat, and, you know, we'd have a runner on 2. And normally I'm like excited, you know, that runner's on 2, that's the tying run. That's all the motivation I need to hit that runner in. And I just felt nothing. You know, I looked at that runner and I was like, well, if she doesn't make it in, she doesn't make it in. And, you know, I'd go up to bat and I didn't have that extra oomph to get the hit. And then, of course, now I'm being hard on myself because I don't have that extra oomph. I probably don't have the extra oomph because you know, that negative self-talk. There's just this constant circle. And I remember being out in the outfield during BP, and I thank God for sunglasses, because I had my sunglasses on and I was just in the outfield, and there was just tears going down my face, and no one noticed. And thinking back to that, of course I wanted people to notice. I was hiding it, but the one thing that would have helped during this time is, and I'll probably hit on this a bit later, but it's just knowing that people are with you. And I think that's a big thing for coaches and teammates to know, is you don't always want help. You just want to know that someone's there for you. And as a coach, I think that's hard because we get lost in, you know, our goal of wanting to have the best team. But sometimes all of your players need is just to know you're with them. And Coach Smith did a really good job of doing that. We never had a conversation about it because I was nervous to have that conversation with our head coach, but he did a good job of at least recognizing that I wasn't myself. And to me, that felt like he was on my side and not against me, and not judging me and looking at me like, you know, I was being weak.
Right.
So, where was I? So yes, we were in Minnesota, and then everything kind of started to spiral because, you know, when things got bad, I didn't have the mental skills to work through them. And so things got bad and it just spiraled, and I wasn't able to come out of it. And I ended up not starting in center field come Canada Cup. And I sat down with our mental performance coach and kind of tried to explain some things to her. And that's when she mentioned burnout. And she mentioned how, you know, when you get into, say you graduate university, you graduate high school, or you reach this goal you've been working on for so long, you kind of get there and it's like, now what?
Right.
And you don't know where to go after that. And so she mentioned burnout, and at the time I was angry. I saw it as she was picking something that she could justify, where in my mind I was like, no, this is way worse than burnout. I feel way worse than burnout. But what I learned was burnout can actually come across as being depressed. And so she said that, and I started to really dig into what that was and what that looked like. And after Canada Cup, started making those little baby steps to start to improve. And how I overcame this, it wasn't fast like I would have liked it to have been. I wish I could have just, and everything was good. But I started asking my teammates for help. I explained to them that I really just wasn't having fun and wasn't feeling motivated. And so I looked at them and I just said, make sure I'm having fun. And they would come up to me. Janet Leong would come up to me and she was like, you're Larissa Franklin. You're the protector of all things that are grass. And, you know, it made me laugh. That's all I needed at that point, was make me laugh. Like, let's have fun. And then we also decided the tournament following Canada Cup, I would finish the game and I would go up to some of the teammates and I'd tell them my 3 positives. So whether I went 0 for 3 that game, whether it was I went 1 for 3, I would go up to them and say, okay, I had good at bats. I picked good pitches. I felt like I was seeing the ball very well. You know, I would find any 3 positives, and that started to change the way I was thinking about things and not leaving the game thinking about all of the negatives. And then personally, I had to stop journaling and reflecting. I was journaling and reflecting about everything, which I still do, but at that point, all of my reflections were like how I could be better. And for me, I just had to start free writing. I had to start working on gratitude. And so I started doing those 2 things instead of trying to analyze and be better every single second. So what I learned during this time is there's a lot of things that play into burnout. Perfectionism, expectations, constant negative self-talk, and of course the thing that I knew going into it was physical burnout. So I think that's where burnout gets confusing, is people think if I give them breaks and if I give them time off, or we don't work them as hard, that they won't be as burnt out. But burnout's a mindset. It comes from there's probably a better definition for this that I can't give, but you're that negative mindset all the time, and not enjoying what you're doing, not enjoying the process because of those things. And then just a little thing that I started to incorporate to turn things around is I started saying the mantra strong and free. And credit to Sarah Groenwegen, because I took her idea of putting the anthem on my glove and I put strong and free on the inside. And that became the thing that I constantly say to myself every single night. I will journal one thing that I did that was stronger, that made me stronger, and one thing that I did that was freeing. And that provided me with more of that balance of, okay, I'm getting better, but I'm also enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm doing freeing, fun things at the same time. So that's what I've tried to emphasize since, is making sure that I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I'm not doing it because it's a job. And in terms of how that relates to the younger girls is just continuing to make sure that you're having fun. Find the fun, whether it's getting out on a tee and having a little challenge with yourself, or it's just choosing to go and play with friends. Like you can always be getting better at the same time as you're having fun, and just not treating everything you're doing as a job and a need to be better. It's a want to be better.
Right. That's awesome. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you, unless you want to continue.
No, that's good. I can branch out from your questions.
Okay, so I think maybe my biggest question right now is about COVID. And you guys, you ladies were all training in Halifax together, and then kind of blink of an eye, everything changed. Everything that you had been working on and focusing on had changed. So were you able to use this experience and the things that you've learned and been working on within yourself to help manage that change in direction? Can you tell us about kind of how you're training now and what that looks like, and how that's factored into it all?
Yeah, no, totally. It's funny because after that, so this past fall, 2019, I ended up getting injured. I injured a rib somehow and was out for 6 weeks, and it was like my mini quiz. And then we got to Halifax in February, and I ended up getting a mild concussion, and that was like another mini quiz of how I could handle that. And then COVID hit, and it was like, I mean, a lot of people would probably say it was like the test, but to me the test is the Olympics. Right. So I would say that was another mini quiz, and I felt like everything I had been working on was, that was my quiz. And I felt like I dealt with it very well because I was already trying to work on just enjoying myself and choosing to do the things that are freeing, choosing to do the things that are fun, that I enjoy, and prioritizing those things. So when that time came, it was kind of like, okay, we're not doing softball now, but I can still, essentially, I can enjoy living my life every single day. And right. That's what I was trying to do. I was treating the whole Olympic journey, and still am, as a celebration. And And that was no different. It was like, okay, well, I'll continue to celebrate this time at home and enjoy this time at home. And it's really been working on being happy and having fun in that present moment. And I felt like all of that prepared me for these COVID times.
That's pretty great, actually. Something, it's, hindsight, to be grateful to have gone through all of that so that you're able to deal with this that much easier is pretty incredible. I think for a lot of the people that are listening, they want to know how to support their athletes. So from a coaching perspective, what's your advice to those coaches and even parents about how to support their athletes, and how to create that safe environment to be able to have those discussions in?
Yeah, I think so for coaches and parents. Well, for coaches, every athlete is different. And if you can recognize that every athlete is different and you can try to approach each athlete how they would want to be approached, you're going to have more success with communicating with them. And that's what I think is so incredible about great coaches, is they're able to connect with athletes differently, and they're able to coach each athlete differently. And sometimes we recognize that we need to do that physically. Like maybe we can't push someone as hard as we can push the other person physically, but we also have to think about it from the mental aspect and make it a priority to understand them. And then incorporating fun. So I remember growing up, it wasn't just softball, we'd play dodgeball, obstacle courses, competitions, and it's those things that made it fun to go to softball. And if you relate it to my story, it's kind of like I had this ultimate goal of starting at the Olympics, let's say, and coaches have this ultimate goal of their teams winning a provincial championship. But if your athletes aren't enjoying themselves along the way, you're not going to get their best performance when you need it most. So it's making sure that they're having fun, and like I said, you're understanding and supporting them on their journey, because it is their journey. It's not your journey. You're a coach because you're trying to make these athletes into better people, better athletes, and for them to enjoy their time.
That's great. Okay, so you had mentioned that none of your teammates saw you crying that day on the field. But what could your teammates have done that would have made you comfortable in that moment if they had seen you? Or do you think that you would have even been receptive to having your teammates kind of confront you? That's maybe not the right word, but approach you about what they might have seen you dealing with. Do you think what would you have wanted from them?
Yeah, I mean, would I have been receptive? Probably not. And that's, I think, that the tough part is that when you go to help someone, you might not get the reaction from them that you're hoping, because we want to help because it makes us feel good as humans. But when someone, pushes you away or doesn't give you, the warm and fuzzies that you helped them, then it's hard to deal with that. So I probably wouldn't have been too receptive. I probably wouldn't have been able to talk about how I was feeling that time, especially because it was right before a game. But it would have meant so much to me. And some of my teammates did come up to me. It just wasn't in that moment, but I did have conversations. But it would have meant so much that they noticed and that they were willing to support me, because when you're feeling that way, you make up all of these different lies that no one's on your team and no one understands what you're going through. And that's not true at all. Like, people understand. And that was one of the biggest things. A couple of my teammates said some things and they understood. They had gone through similar things. But just having their support and knowing they're with me and not against me, they're not judging how I'm feeling, they're not judging how I'm performing, but they're with me, that was the biggest thing I was looking for, was the support.
Well, that's awesome. All right, well, I'm going to continue to ask you questions in a little bit. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Derek, but I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I think everyone listening probably got a ton out of it. And yeah, we'll bring you back in a little bit to ask you some more questions. So thanks so much, Larissa.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. So next up, we have Derek Mason. And I'll give Derek's bio before we start into his story. So Derek was one of the youngest players to ever make the men's national team, representing Canada for the first time in '06 at the WBSC America's Qualifier at the age of 22 years old. Prior to that, played for Team BC at the 2001 Canada Summer Games. He competed in numerous Canadian championships, winning various medals and many, many accolades. At the national team level, Derek participated at the 2006 and 14 WBSC America's Qualifiers. He represented Canada at 3 WBSC Men's World Softball World Championships and won gold medal as well at the 2015 Pan American Games. Derek now shares his story and work in mental training through his own program, which he's going to share with us this evening. So welcome, Derek.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here, and we're really looking forward to hearing your story as well. So why don't you walk us through kind of what's led you to this point, and where you are within your career?
Yeah, for sure. So, Larissa, great job. Really great to hear your perspective. And I think it's this is a topic that's something very near and dear to me. It's something I've studied and throughout my career, both out of interest and out of necessity, really, as I'll share with you some of the challenges I've faced and overcome during my career. I think it's more common than we like to admit in athletics that what Larissa was touching on there with perfectionism and worries and concerns about what our teammates are thinking or opposition or parents. Those are more common than we think with athletes, but there is kind of this bravado mentality that still exists a little bit where this topic is more and more becoming a topic of conversation out in the community with like Bell Let's Talk and stuff like that, but it's still not something that you kind of just shoot around with teammates here or there and talk about some struggles that you're having. So I really think conversations like this are really beneficial, and glad to be doing it. So as you mentioned, my story with the national team started back in 2006, and as a very young player on that team, it was kind of a very unique situation. It was a very veteran team. I would say the average age was well into their 30s, and it was kind of me, Stephen Mullally in our early 20s, starting the next wave of players on the team, but kind of that divide in age and that sort of thing. But with that team, we had our first introduction to sport mental training with Ken Ravizza. We met with him in Las Vegas. He's the author of Heads Up Baseball, and it's something that at the time, I think being young and a bit boastful about my spot as a young national team player and bordering on cocky, but without proper what I would call healthy mental skills to be able to deal with adversity, the sort of situation where when things are going well, you're feeling great, but when adversity came, as it does a lot in our sport, wasn't able to handle those moments as well. So it was more up and down early in my career. 2007 with the Vancouver Grey Sox, the year that we won a national championship, we had a mental performance coach with us named Jim Murphy. So he was with us throughout the year, and really kind of diving more into visualization of what our goal was for the rest of that season. And then at nationals, actually some game day preparation and a little more formalized routine, which I really gravitated to, I believe helped my performance then, but as well, I think, as Larissa pointed to, the way it was being presented, or at least we were absorbing it, was, okay, I just need to figure this out so I can be a good ball player, as opposed to, these are life skills that we all only have one mind, and the mind you train outside of the sport or in the sport, it is the same, one and the same. So still at that point, there was a bit of separation there where it was, okay, I'll do some of this, but just as long as it helps my performance, but otherwise I'm not really gonna, take up my life with this. From there, I spent 2 off seasons in Australia and New Zealand respectively. And so with that, I just finished university, put my career plans on hold, and it was essentially play ball here in the summer, go away in the winter, play ball and travel, and a bit of kind of like delaying reality almost, where at that point, less to do with the pressures of what's going on at home and stuff like that, and you're just enjoying it and traveling and that. And it was coming home from those trips where I really started to face some kind of life-altering generalized anxiety, which showed up not only in my play, but definitely in my everyday life. So what that looked like as far as related to ball, a lot of overthinking, overanalyzing, confidence was slipping, kind of that head on a swivel as far as what could others be thinking. If I don't have a good at bat or a good game here, that'll kind of bring down my view of myself or what others may view of me as a player. And so it was all very much focused outside of what I could control at that point. And coming home from those trips and not really sliding into a focused career immediately that maybe I thought I would have or should have at that time, didn't really put me in the best headspace heading into the 2009 Worlds. And so that was one where it's my first World Championships, and my play, I would say, had dipped since kind of my start with the national team, where kind of younger and more naive and just reacting more. And as more thinking comes in, your performance is going to dip as you're reacting less, and reaction time goes down, and you're relying less on just your natural instincts. And so that 2009 Worlds, I would say in a better space compared to maybe a few months previous, but not the situation where I was living up and playing to my potential. And so from that, my performance in the following 2 years continued to kind of take a slide towards the 2011 season, where our head coach at the time took me aside after nationals and said, listen, I know you're talented enough to be on this team. We're planning ahead to the next Worlds in 2013 in New Zealand. But at this point, if you don't take steps to rectify your game, you're not going to be making that trip. And so that was a good eye opener. Glad to have that conversation, and I connected with Dave Petkow, the hitting coach out here in BC, and really dedicated myself that off season, all winter, kind of making that hour each way trek to rebuild my swing. So the result the next season was dramatically improved results. I was MVP of the first tournament back in a top tier event in Australia, and my game was coming around, but I would still say my mental skills weren't developing. They weren't really finding the aspect that was really clicking for me. And so as a result, I had a decent season in that 2012 year, but I got cut from that 2013 Worlds team. And I would say in my ball career, that's definitely the first time I've been cut from a team. And just a reflection point. So kind of a chance to make a decision. Is that it? Like, am I satisfied with what I've had early in my career? And at 28, 29, am I done, or am I going to figure this out? And so my choice was to continue figuring out. And when it came to the physical side, that was continuing to rededicate myself to my hitting skills and to my overall performance. And on the mental side, that included continually just kind of looking for different resources to help build my knowledge in that area. So what that looked like was reading sports psychology books, working with counselors, working with sports psychologists, and I'll fast forward here to 2015. And so that's the year that we had the World Championships in Saskatoon and the Pan Am Games in Toronto. So a big year. I'd made my spot on both teams, so feeling good about getting back into the fold. And it was leading into 2015, where working with a coach or a counselor of some sort, I was introduced for the first time to mindfulness meditation. And so at first, kind of being kind of the typical jock and not being exposed to that at all, I kind of saw it as, okay, I'll try this. It seems out there, but I'll do it as long until it works, and then I can put it down, and in the hippies and the people up in the mountains with their robes, they can take it back and they can take it. But from there, I did some more reading and reflecting on, how this related to me. And so one of the key books that I read was Phil Jackson's book, 11 Rings, where he talks about his unique methods of applying mindfulness and meditation to his coaching techniques, and specifically to Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and top performers that he's coached in his career. And as an athlete, a sports book, those sorts of things really spoke to me, and I was able to kind of dive into that. And so after seeing a TED Talk about meditation from the founder of Headspace, really explained it in a very down-to-earth, non-hippy-dippy, very just kind of utilitarian as far as understanding the mind and what it is, how we all walk around with this thing that shapes our perspective of everything that we do, and how learning about it and actually being able to train it is an amazing life skill. And so as I practiced, I continued to use the meditation apps and take some courses, and grew my knowledge of how the mind worked. And so from that, what I was able to gain is seeing my thoughts and negative feelings that I was experiencing, and learning and understanding that everyone experiences, and seeing it with a little more space and viewing it with a little less ownership or blame towards myself. Because if you take the automatic thought that pops into your mind, if you're just sitting there and listening and a thought pops into your mind, you realize you actually don't have control over those types of thoughts, whether positive or negative. Learning to kind of disassociate yourself from those, and not be so hard on yourself when those types of tough thoughts that you may resist, when those pop up, realizing that, okay, well, that's just kind of popping up in my mind. I don't have to take it as truth. I can let that go and reconnect with what's real and what's in front of me, which, you read a lot in psychology books and sports psychology and mindfulness meditation. It's all about present moment attention. And so for me, when I was first learning sports psychology, it was always, you have to play in the present. You got to play in the present moment. But it was never really explained, like, okay, what's that mean? Like, how do you do that?
Right.
Does that mean that as soon as the game starts, you flip a switch and you're present for the entire game? And if you lose attention, then it means that you're not doing it right? Well, no, it's as you learn more about how the mind works, that it's built to wander, and that our job is to just understand when it has wandered off and your focus is weaned, to bring it back and to be where it needs to be when you need it. And one of my favorite quotes from that is, be where your feet are when it matters. And so when you're on the ball field, there's a lot of in-between time, maybe in between pitches, like the expectation to be fully focused for a 2.5-hour ball game is just not practical. But being able to understand how the mind works and how it'll wander, and being able to realize that and bring it back to focus how and when you need it, is a very valuable tool. And so to bring it back to 2015, so I actually started meditating consistently, I would say May, and the Worlds were in June. So it was kind of a trial by fire, and like really facing the music in a key situation. And it was really great to learn in that time about, one, being able to reconnect with the breath, and how that is a good gauge for how your mind-body connection is feeling at that time. You know, when it comes to when we're under stress and our fight, flight, or freeze responses kicking in, we'll notice we have a short and shallow breath. But when we're more calm and relaxed and we're in safe circumstances, we have long and deep breathing. And so that's why we're often told in competition, or when we're nervous, or when we're talking in webinars, to take long, deep breaths to connect with something that we can actually feel and calm our system. But one interesting piece of advice I was handed was, you know, as a way to in those in-between moments, because whether it's ball, whether it's golf, whether it's waiting in line at a supermarket or something like that, those in-between moments is when our mind has a lot of room to wander, and oftentimes it'll wander to familiar thought patterns. And so for a lot of us, that could be negative thought patterns, it could be worry, it could be replaying something in the past, something we can't change, it could be jumping to the future to predict something that we can't change right now. So that thing to bring us back to the moment, the suggestion was grab an object and put it in your back pocket. And so for me, I grabbed a little pebble and grabbed it at the Saskatoon ball field and put it in my back pocket at the very first exhibition game we had leading into the Worlds. And so in those in-between moments, if I wasn't wanting to connect to my breath or whatever, my go-to focus, rather than just kind of letting my mind wander and go, oh, I got that bat next inning, and this he's got a good changeup, I got to keep my hands back and kind of let the mind wander off into a certain spot. I'd notice that, let that go, and then return and actually feel that rock and actually feel its shape, feel its hardness, and kind of steer my mind towards something that's real and tactile and in that present moment, rather than just kind of letting it spin off to thinking into the future or into the past. And so I kept that rock with me through those preliminary games, into our World Championships, and through the Pan Am Games. And we amassed a 23-1 record along the way, winning 2 gold medals. And the one loss, a playoff game versus New Zealand, is the one where that rock I forgot on my bedside table. So
no way.
yeah, crazy. I'm not superstitious, but I've been a believer in the rock in the pocket ever since. And rock in the pocket, whether it's that, whether it's a strap on your glove. I see a lot of batters will stare at a particular nick on their bat as they take their deep breath before they're at bats. It's finding what works for you, finding that thing that can allow you to let go of the chatter and connect with that present moment, that time, and bring your best self. Because if we can eliminate as many distractions as possible, including our thoughts, including our feelings, we can bring as much of our talents and natural flow to that situation. So in the last few years, I've continued, my education in this space, whether it's meditation, whether it's study and conversation about thoughts, restructuring and understanding, where our thoughts come from, and that. And as you mentioned, I've put it together in the final stage of preparing a 6-week mental training program for athletes that is really a day-by-day, one short lesson every day, followed by exercises that is an educational program just to build that foundation about the mind, how it's evolved over time, how it works, where these thoughts come from, some meditation and mindfulness, so we can gain this kind of cool perspective of being able to step back and not get overwhelmed by the thoughts or the feelings or the moments that we're experiencing. Dealing with some challenging thoughts, and as well as some of those affirmations that Larissa was speaking to that we can connect to in that moment and really bring our best selves. So if people are interested, and I don't know if we can put it in the chat, but it's if to sign up for a list, and I'll be able to send out some more information in a little while. It's derekmasoncoaching.com, Mason with a Y. And yeah, I'll be putting that out in the next few weeks or months, and hope to help a lot of athletes and coaches and parents, just kind of gain that understanding of how we can train the mind towards performance mindset.
That's awesome. I think that's a really useful tool, because as I was listening to you, talk about what happened in 2013 and how you were able to not crumble there, and you had the desire to learn, and you clearly have the desire to educate. I think that's great, because not everyone has that ability. So I think a lot of the people listening, coaches, parents, are looking for resources like that. So that's fantastic. I do have one question for you before we bring Larissa back for a few more, and that kind of is centered around your teammates. And while you're going through all of this and you're opening your eyes to meditation and mindfulness, are you having conversations with your teammates about those kinds of things? Are they receptive to that? Are they interested in how you've been able to reframe and refocus? Is that something that occurred with the other members of your team?
I think it's one of those things where when it comes to anything with the mind, it is a very personal situation. And so it's not a scenario where I want to push anything on anyone who's not ready for it, or maybe not comfortable having that conversation. I have kind of made my story known to the group in the past. We faced some adversity with some individuals and some loss in previous years, and so tried to be a role model when it comes to being open to have that conversation, and happy to see some of the younger players that are coming up now are feeling comfortable to come ask questions and stuff like that. But it's still one of those subjects that isn't kind of you talk about over the dinner table when you're on a road trip sort of thing. It's right. I think we pick each other's brains about maybe it's various techniques that people may be using, whether it's with preparation as far as preparing for an opponent, preparing for even just preparing for at-bats, and maybe some little things that we use, but I wouldn't say it's something that we really force on anyone or push on anyone to any extent, because it is everyone's individual situation. And as Larissa had mentioned, I think the biggest thing for athletes to know, and whether it's coaches, parents, it's knowing that they're there, they have your back, right. And they, if needed, they're there to listen, they're there to give you a pat on the back, or they're there to point you in the right direction to get some help if you need it. That would be my number one hope of the program I'm developing and these talks and that sort of thing, is that athletes who are struggling with something, or something just feels off, not right, my hope is that more and more often players and athletes are feeling more comfortable to reach out and ask, that that it's not weird, it's not weak. It's not a sign that you've done something wrong. We all have hitting coaches, we all have defensive coaches, and whether it's high-level performance athletics or in life, yeah, it makes sense to get that assistance and have that sort of support.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll invite Larissa back, and then I have a couple more questions for you. If anybody has any more questions, please put them in the question box. We have a few more minutes. Try not to go too far over. So welcome back, Larissa.
That was awesome, Derek. I love the rock in the pocket. I'm definitely going to try that. I feel it just like incorporates another sense, right? Like I've tried the focal point and everything, but like that extra sense of feeling it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try that one.
Cool.
Awesome. So I do have a question for you that's been put in the question box. If either of you felt yourselves going down kind of the same path again, do you feel as though you have enough tools to deal with that or prevent that, you from experiencing the same kind of negative self-talk or anxiety? Like, do you feel as though you have those tools within yourself, or do you think you'd be more open to reaching out to find help sooner at this point? Maybe Larissa will work with you.
Sure. I do feel like, yes, the tools are there, but every situation kind of presents itself differently. So, having learned what I have, I'm going to continue to work on those things that I've seen are successful, while also understanding that, some other situation may come up that presents itself a little bit differently. But if I continue to trust the skills I'm working on, just knowing that will hopefully help me at least get out of the situation faster. Maybe not prevent it, but at least help get out of the situation faster.
Great. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, for me, there is that belief and confidence now that I do have the skills that it takes to kind of see situations, be able to step back from it and understand. But for me, it's very helpful to be able, even having the tools is very helpful to be able to even just talk it out. And you're even kind of going over things that you already knew or know and kind of reaffirming things to yourself. So whether that's with a psychology coach or a teammate or a coach or a confidant or something like that, I think it's important to be able to have those outlets, to be able to talk things through and get that feedback, rather than feeling like we have to do everything ourselves. And so even if you do have the tools, nothing is a solo journey or solo adventure. That's why we have multiple coaches on teams. That's why I have teammates to lean on and loving family and stuff. So I think that's how I approach things as I get stressors and whatnot come up.
Awesome. Could you give us a few recommendations for our summer reading lists? Books that, Derek, you've touched on a couple, but ones that, would be really great for coaches to, if they had some time over the course of this odd summer, to take a look at. What would your top three be?
For me, or go ahead, Larissa.
Yeah, either of you.
If you have them, you can go ahead. I just want to look at my book list quickly.
Well, on the mindfulness side of things, so 11 Rings by Phil Jackson really ties it well to sport. The Mindful Athlete by George Munford. He is the coach of Phil Jackson, and so it was kind of able to bring that full circle and continue that tie together. And a third one, I've got a long list, but Larissa, you come up with a couple and let me see if I can find my third.
Okay. Yeah, I have two off the top of my head. We actually recently read one as a team called Relentless Optimism, and I'm bad with authors. But yeah, Relentless Optimism was that one. And one of my all-time favorite books, which isn't around mental performance, but is around seeing seeing the optimism, and it's called Obstacles the Way by Ryan Holiday. So it's about seeing the obstacle as actually an opportunity. So I enjoyed that one too.
Very cool.
Cool. I'm drawing a blank. So
That's
those
right.
are 4 good ones.
That's great. That'll keep us busy. All right, I have a question for you, Derek. What do you do when you're in a slump?
Yeah, it's unavoidable, and I'm looking back to last nationals, and it was one big slump, and it is miserable no matter whether you've trained your mind or not, or if you're practicing training your mind. For me, first thing I want to do is have some perspective, to realize that I've been there before, that I've gone through slumps before, because sometimes we'll follow this thought pattern of, is this ever going to end? Will I ever get another hit? What do I have to do to get? I'll do anything to get out of this. First, having some perspective and understanding that this is a very short portion of your career, and yeah, you've had it before, and you'll do it again. Second is getting back to what you can control. So that is showing up with good effort, your attitude, being a good teammate, and being able to understand where your focus is at any time. So understanding that if your mind is drifting off to those negative thought patterns, bringing it back to those negative, or to those present moment situations that you actually have some control over. And then realizing that we're all more than just hitters as ball players. So maybe for a short period your hitting isn't where you want it to be, but can you give that much more on defense? Can you be that much better of a teammate? Can you pick some pitches? Can you bring more to the table for your teammates as you kind of ride that wave, and understand that it will come to an end, and approach every at-bat as if it's your first in any given line, rather than coming up to bat with that in the back of your mind going, oh, I'm 0 for my last 8, as best you can coming into that bat of, I'm 0 for 0, and I'm going to approach this as presently as possible and do my best, and not be a slave to that result. Just live with whatever happens and stay connected to the present.
Oh, that's great. Larissa, Derek already kind of talked about what he does to refocus within a game, but what are the tricks that you use to do that?
I mean, a big thing for me, and Derek kind of hit on it as well, is just like how your focus goes in and out. I'm definitely someone who has to go like in and out. Like I have to not be focused completely and then to focus in. And how I do focus in is having that routine. So if we're talking offense, it's every single time I go up to bat, it's having the same routine when I'm in the hole, and the same routine when I'm on deck, and the same routine when I go up to bat. And having those little things, like I'll have a focal point like Derek talked about on the outfield fence, and that's just a part of my routine. And it's kind of like once I start that routine, it's go time. And then once that routine's over, it's like, okay, I can let my focus go somewhere else again. Yeah, so having a routine.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys one more question because we're already a bit over, but this is, I mean, we could go on and on and on. This is such a great topic. But my question is kind of how, or what is the one thing that you would tell a younger kid right now? Because some of this is a lot to handle, a lot to swallow. But you know, if you're talking to a 14-year-old, what would you tell them about how to handle pressure right now? Derek, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think first of all, Larissa hit on it, is we're all playing this sport or sports for, we all start and continue for the same reason, is we enjoy it. It's fun. And you know, fun has more than just, it's not just fun. It actually has performance benefits to it. You know, actually has chemical benefits to the brain and stuff like that, where that would be the first thing, is connecting to that and having some perspective around you only get a very short period of time to play your sport at a good level, at an elite level, or even a house level. And I'm kind of facing that near towards the end of my career and realizing that actually you only have a short period within that time that you put it all together and you feel really good about your game. Larissa spoke about her hitting rounding into form in 2018, and you've been at this for a number of years, and you've got a fair window ahead of you, but it does go quickly, and so as much as possible enjoying it and not taking anything for granted, being grateful for the opportunity to play the sport, to be active and enjoy it with your friends and family.
Awesome. Larissa?
Yeah, I would reiterate what Derek said, just have fun and enjoying what you're doing. And then the other thing I would add to that is something simple that you can do without feeling like you have to bite everything off, is just journal, just write things down. Like it doesn't have to be the perfect journaling. You don't have to be working, exactly how you should be on these mental skills, but just that awareness and that reflection before practicing, after practicing, and you'll start to understand yourself a little bit more, and that in itself is working on your mental skills.
That's awesome. That's really great advice. I think, I learned a ton tonight, so just in, one short hour. So thank you both so much for being a part of tonight and our webinar series. We're really grateful for you both sharing your expertise, and we look forward to the next year or more and seeing what's to come. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Great.
That will conclude today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any comments or suggestions for our speaker series webinars, feel free to send them to Gilles LeBlanc or Angela Ballantyne at Softball Canada. Our next speaker series webinar will be a chat with Jason Shipley and Jonah Evans from our great partners at Rawlings Canada, who will explain some of the technology, sizing, and selection information for softball equipment. This session will be held at 7 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, June 30th. Please make sure you register at softball.ca. Cela conclut notre webinaire aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup d'avoir participé. Si vous avez des commentaires ou des suggestions pour ce webinaire, veuillez les envoyer à Gilles Leblanc ou Angela Ballantyne à Softball Canada. Notre prochain webinaire sera une discussion avec Jason Shipley et Jonah Evans, de nos excellents partenaires à Rawlings Canada, qui parleront de la technologie, la taille et la sélection des produits d'équipement de softball. Cette session aura lieu à 19h mardi prochain, le 30 juin. Assurez-vous de vous inscrire à softball.ca.